Hi, I'm Lucas Gilkey with Hometown Hero, and today we're going to discuss crafting reasonable regulation and working with the politicians who have a vested interest and making sure that our industry either thrives or the ulterior, they're trying to figure out how to curtail us and how to limit us in what we do. But regardless, it's our job to navigate this and figure out kind of where we go from here. Thank you for joining us. I think it's important that we start this conversation from an industry standpoint. Everybody has good intentions, whether it's people in our industry or it's politicians looking to sort of curtail or limit or even make illegal what we do, right? Everybody has good intentions. From our industry, there's always good intentions around, what we're trying to pass on the legislative side. One thing we have to remember, these products are federally legal. They're also state legal in the vast majority of states. So we're going into a situation where the ideal scenario in most places around hemp-derived cannabinoids is that things stay the way they are, right? It's also, luckily, it's typically the easiest thing to do. It's much harder to create a bill or to change a law than it is to keep things the way they are. Now, and every state is different. Every region is different in the way that this is sort of being viewed and handled. But one thing to remember is, we're at a point, we're in the very beginning of this industry, and one of the things that the marijuana industry really messed up was negotiating with the legislators and giving up too much. I can't stress to you guys enough, we have the higher ground. You've got to protect that. You've got to understand that what we're doing is legal. It's not illegal, it is fully legal. So you have the ability to protect that within your legislative session, within your representatives and your senators, and work with them and help them understand that these products are legal. And so it's very, very important that as we go through this process, you don't give up more than you have to. We're hearing rumors of just like the marijuana industry, people voluntarily wanting to do these massive, crazy taxes. There's a reason a lot of the companies in the marijuana industry right now are struggling and they're going out of business because this bad legislation that they allowed to get passed under the premise of we'll keep what you do legal and we'll allow you to do it, that doesn't really work when the businesses aren't sustainable and they can't make it in the long term. So it's very, very dangerous where we are right now, and it's very important that everybody understands we have the ability to craft the future of this industry as it sits right now. The next thing I want to discuss is sort of what we are a fan of when it comes to legislation and what we are not fans of. We are big proponents of anything that protects the consumers. That's very important to us. Anything that protects the consumers, we support, we want to push it through, we want to see it enacted. Now on the flip side, there's ways to manipulate our industry to try and get money out of it through taxes and through different kinds of fees. There's also just bad legislation, bad regulatory stuff. We're seeing examples of this in a lot of states around packaging. At this point, there's 46 different states that have different packaging rules, and we're trying to figure out how to consolidate this as an industry. One thing that, if you're in this industry, that we need your help with is trying to make some kind of consistent packaging requirements throughout the states. It's turning into a nightmare. If you're in this industry, you probably know by now how much of a nightmare this is turning into when you're dealing with every single state having different packaging requirements. It's a lot, and from a logistics and supply standpoint, it really makes a mess of things of trying to sell a product into each individual state with custom tailored packaging. One of the things that we really need to focus on is making sure that we're consistent with child resistant packaging, consistent with proper warning labels that give the amount of information that's needed to a consumer, not a crazy long sort of ridiculous warning label like California's Prop 65, and really just trying to make some sort of standard around packaging for our industry so that we continue to grow and thrive. That's something very important that we need to discuss and we need to focus on this year in the legislative sessions in every state. Now we're going to discuss a very heated topic, taxes. So in the past, we've seen the marijuana industry give up essentially very, very large taxes on the products that are sold in states where there's medicinal or recreational. And so it's almost turned into like a bribe, right? And that's a bad word, but we're going to talk about it openly because it seems as though in certain states the marijuana industry caved on these massive taxes to essentially allow themselves to exist. We're already here. We are already legal on a federal and state level. We don't have to give up these massive taxes to be allowed to do what we do. That's not a requirement for our industry. So it's very important that as we're all going through these legislative sessions, that we're not just caving and throwing these ridiculous tax revenue streams to these governments under the premise of they're going to fund some agency or do this other thing. A great example of where taxes can go wrong is with the MSA, the Master Settlement Agreement, if you're familiar with the tobacco industry at all. There was a tax that was agreed to by the tobacco companies with a variety of states, I think at this point almost all states. But the tobacco industry at this point has paid $145 billion in taxes. Less than a third of that has actually gone to something that it was designed for. So the states are now viewing this as a very large revenue source, and they're just looking to rip money from it. So we don't want to be that. We're at a point where we don't need to bribe the state level agencies with some wild tax. We don't need to do these things. We're already legally in existence. So at this point, it's really how do we stay the way we are versus trying to give up a ton of stuff to get to the point where the marijuana industry is and they're struggling, and you've got companies going out of business because they can't afford the taxes. There's too much regulation, over-regulation. So we've got to be very protective of this industry because of how young it is and learn from the mistakes that the marijuana industry made. The next topic of discussion is criminal penalties. One of the things that we're seeing pretty consistently within our industry is these wild criminal penalties that are being proposed for some sort of infraction around hemp-derived cannabinoids, whether it's at the retail level or consumer level. So one thing to think about, we're not trying to create more cannabis criminals, right? There's been 100 years of that. There's been plenty of people that have literally rotted in jail their entire lives because of cannabis products. Why are we trying to repeat this? That doesn't make any sense at all. We are far beyond the point where we need to move beyond that. The people that are in jail for crimes with marijuana or cannabis or whatever they're in jail for regarding cannabis shouldn't really be there anymore. So the fact that our industry is willingly proposing criminal penalties for some of this stuff is kind of shocking to us. So look, we're a huge fan of anything that protects the consumers, but we are not trying to create cannabis criminals. That's something of the past. We need to move beyond that, and I'm going to ask for everybody's help in that. Please help us not to create more cannabis criminals with some of this legislation that's being enacted. There's a few other things that we need to discuss as well. There's a lot of states right now that are looking at proposing creating agencies around hemp-derived cannabinoids. And the problem with a agency specifically focused like that is they're typically very slow moving. They typically do not help any of the situations regarding bad actors in an industry. So and they're also incentivized to sort of overregulate and overtax. So we're essentially, in a way, if we're pushing to create these agencies that are just there for hemp, we're essentially pushing to create our enemies, right? And make this way more complex than it needs to be. These state level agencies that are super focused, they don't really help the process. They hurt the businesses, they make it more difficult to do business, there's no real benefit to it. Next topic of conversation is back to labels, right? Right now, we've got 50 different states. Every state is trying to figure out what exact wording needs to be on their warning label. The problem is a lot of them are different. So now we've got, as a business, we're trying to maintain and manage, 46 different packaging scenarios for all these different states with different wordings and different requirements. It's really why we're pushing to have the industry consolidate and really pushing to have the industry come to some sort of an agreement on what's sustainable and what should be beneficial to the consumers, right? We're looking for warnings that are beneficial to the consumers and help them understand, one, what's in the product, two, that there's nothing harmful in it, which goes to full panel COAs, which we're a huge proponent of. If any company or industry is not using full panel COAs, for the love of God, start using full panel COAs. They are a little bit expensive, but this is something that we have to do. It's not an option. If you're not using full panel COAs, please start using full panel COAs. It's simply you're testing for microbials, you're testing for heavy metals, pesticides, essentially any harmful constituents in the product, and making sure that it's fully healthy for the consumers. It's very, very important for us. And the last topic is simply milligram caps. So you'll see in a lot of different states that are rec or medicinal that they've put milligram caps on typically a serving size of a cannabis product. In those states, it's marijuana products. That is horrible legislation. That is taking it to the extreme unnecessarily. When you buy alcohol, is there a limit on how much alcohol you can buy? Is there a limit on what you're allowed to take per serving? Everybody's different, right? Like I personally, 5 milligrams makes me very happy. I'm good. I'm content with 5 milligrams. I know people that take 100, and that's what they need to take to feel the same effects that I take at 5. Everybody's body is different and reacts different to tetrahydrocannabinols and cannabinoids. So it's very important that we allow people the flexibility to figure out what dose works best for them. By putting milligram caps on these products, it's unnecessarily regulating something that doesn't need to be regulated. So these are 3 small things that I'm just giving examples of because we're in legislative sessions, because everything's sort of moving very quickly right now. It's things that we need to be aware of and as an industry, and also be thinking on the same page and be thinking forward in terms of what's sustainable, what's going to help us in the future, and what's going to allow this industry to thrive. Right now, our regulatory team is paving the way for having some sort of standardized legislation between the states, and we need your help. So if you are involved in this process within your state, if you have a vested interest, if you're a stakeholder, if you're in the industry, please reach out to us. We can give you the guidance that you need to go to your local state level representatives and give them the information they need to be able to start creating standardized laws throughout the country to make this a lot easier for everyone to do business around these products. It's very important we're all on the same page. We have the resources and we have the team to be able to assist you and help you navigate this. As complex as it may seem, we can give you the resources and assist you in helping you get this done in your state. So if you are in an industry, if you are a stakeholder, even if you're a politician, please feel free to reach out to us. We will help you. We will guide you. We'll give you the information you need. We're trying to make sure that at the end of the day, we're protecting consumers. We're allowing this industry to thrive in the way that it should. And we're really just trying to do good business and work with the states and do something that's functional and makes sense and get everybody on the same page. Thank you for your time, as always, and look forward to seeing you again next week.